Welcome to the Motivated Martial Arts Podcast. Your hosts, Jackson White and Gavin Cook, have been friends and Taekwondo training partners for over 40 years. This podcast will bring you a mixture of their life stories, martial arts, and business experiences to motivate you in life and throughout your martial arts journey. Adding in a mixture of inspiring interviews and some of the best traditional martial artists around today. So over to your hosts, the Motivated Martial Artists.
Welcome to the Motivated Martial Artists Podcast with me, Gavin Cook.
And me, Jackson White.
And this afternoon, we've got Kelly Murray joining us all the way from the US. So we've met Kelly via Facebook. Kelly is one of the skills executive members who we work close with in the US. And she's a really inspiring lady. You know, she's been through a lot in her life. She's been a martial artist throughout. We really wanted to get Kelly on today just to pass on some of her super positive energy to our listeners. So great to have you on today, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. You guys are so lovely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you're missing inauguration day as well. So thanks for that.
It truly is my pleasure to miss inauguration day for you.
Okay, then. So I'm going to kick off, Kelly, with the first question, and it's, I think for our listeners, they know what's coming, but it's good to get a really good foundation and understanding of you as an individual. And to do that, if we can get a little bit of your backstory, where you grew up, your education, and of course, how you got into martial arts.
Yes, of course. So I actually started doing martial arts when I was 3. My parents are martial artists. So my dad does this for a living, just like all of us. And I grew up in the martial arts industry. I was what you would call a dojo rat. That's what we call it here in the US anyway.
Is there a Facebook group for that? Because lots of us have been in that same scenario. I remember doing Taekwondo before I even knew my left and right, or even been to school.
That's it.
Set up a group for that, dojo rat group.
Dojo rat. And I spent my childhood around martial arts, in martial arts. And I grew up with my father, who was a great businessman, great mentor. And he taught me a lot of what I continue to teach today. I helped him to build his operation, and I worked with him teaching and, of course, running one of his schools, and then eventually sort of running all 3 and helping with more business-like decisions until I was about 27. I decided that relationship with my father was strained, and it was really difficult for us to have a great relationship as father-daughter. And I also wanted to try my hand at my other passion, which was musical theater. And I always wanted to move to New York City and give that a whirl. So I did. At 27, I gave up my career. I was making great money. I had a house and a car and a steady boyfriend. I just kind of gave all of that up and said, I'm going to New York City. But I was in for a pretty big, rude awakening when I got to New York City, especially being older. It was very difficult to make a living there, of course. And I struggled as an actress. It was just a very difficult lifestyle I wasn't used to. So I got a lot of kind of part-time jobs. I was a certified personal trainer. So I worked at a gym. I was a nanny. I was, just trying to piece it all together. And I ended up seeing an ad in the paper for a kickboxing instructor, a fitness kickboxing instructor. I said, oh, that's easy money. I can do that. No problem. I'll just do that part-time. And I did. I got the job, and I ended up working as a part-time kickboxing instructor for a company called I Love Kickboxing, which I ended up really hitting it off with the owner at the time. And there was a team of men really building this concept for a demographic of women. So I think what was really helpful for them was to gain my insight as a woman and help to put a really feminine spin on what they were trying to do. So we built this concept, and eventually we franchised. We became one of the quickest growing fitness franchises in the world. And I started out as the corporate general manager. So I was overseeing all of the corporate locations. We had 6. I had over 80 employees that I was overseeing. And I developed during that time some really great methods of recruiting and hiring quickly and developing talent and sort of gave the baseline or the systems structure so that they could be replicated through other franchisees. So I was responsible for helping to build that franchise, eventually became the director of franchise training, where I was training the people who were making the investment into the franchise, and also helping them find their talent, find their managers, groom their managers, and then helping them train their teams even on the mat. So I am obviously a martial artist too. And that was sort of like my big claim to fame. And then I worked as a consultant with Team Perella for that company as well, helping martial arts schools. So thousands of martial arts schools around the world that used my same systems of recruiting and hiring and training, and that were able to have really great success. And then I just felt like my vision for my life was sort of starting to separate from the vision of the company. And for personal reasons, I was getting married. I had my first child. I was commuting to work 3 hours a day. I lived in New York City, but the office was an hour and a half away. I was working 70, 80 hours a week. It just became a difficult grind. And I wanted something more for my life than sitting in a cubicle all day.
Sorry, Gary, do you feel as though it's because you've been in the martial arts game so long, you just reached that point where you just felt as though you just needed something new?
You know, it wasn't martial arts at that point. It was business. And I was sitting at a desk staring at a screen, and, you know, not to make you guys feel worse than you already do about being locked down, but that's how it felt. It felt like a lockdown because I wasn't able to enjoy my free time. I had very little work-life balance, and that falls on me. That was partly my ambition, right? Just wanting to really make this something and make my career my priority. But it became very difficult at the speed we were growing as a company. I couldn't manage and also have a personal life that I enjoyed. So it was sort of a choice I felt like I had to make. And unfortunately for women, that's something that we deal with a lot is, hey, how can we do it all? How can we be moms and wives and also have this really fulfilling career? But I felt like I could do my job in 4 hours. It was this interesting juxtaposition of like, why am I sitting at a desk for 8 hours and commuting 3 hours when I know I could be more efficient if I'm sitting outside in the sun and getting fresh air, and I could still do this job in such a short, so I knew there was something else. And I've always been called to Costa Rica. I've always loved it there. It felt like home. And I decided that, you know, it was now or never. My husband really helped push me, but we sold all of our things and we packed up our car and we moved. We traveled for about 6 months with our 1-year-old son. And then finally we moved to Costa Rica, and I opened my own coaching and consulting business. And I was working about 4 hours a day and spending the rest of the time being a mommy and being at the beach.
Sounds like you're living the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so that was sort of like my background. And I trained in the martial arts all throughout, you know, middle school and high school. I'm a 6th degree black belt. We focused on Ishinryu karate. I've trained in capoeira and Tai Chi and kickboxing, of course. I've won championships. So I feel like I have a unique point of view because I am both a product of the martial arts, but I also really understand the business side of things. Being that I worked for such a big, you know, multi-million-dollar franchise, I understand how it feels on the other side, the business side of it.
Yeah, that's important. Can we just go back and dissect a few things in your early martial arts career?
Sure.
So I know our listeners are always keen to understand this. So what was your first memory of taking a grade in? I know it's difficult taking a grade of some description in martial arts. Can you remember that?
Testing.
Oh, testing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Gosh, do I remember? I was very little when I started, and I hated martial arts when I was little, like hated it. And I was the only girl, and, you know, it was freezing in the winter and it was super hot. We didn't have air conditioning. We had, you know, cement floors. This was not cushy.
Martial arts in the good old days.
Yeah. You know, and I getting hit in the solar plex as a 4-year-old girl, you know, crying to my mom, and they were like, toughen up, you know, like keep your guard up. What's wrong? You know, so I have memories of being little, and we were very close with my dad's teacher from Japan. So I would say my first memory of testing would probably be when I tested for my brown belt. I was probably about 7 or 8. I made my black belt when I was 9. So I was probably about 7 or 8 when I tested for my brown belt, and it was in front of our master, our teacher from Japan. And it was such an interesting moment, because everything that you work for and everything that you've been through sort of leads up to this point. And as a child, you don't know why you're working so hard. You don't know why they're forcing you to get hit in the stomach and cry and do push-ups on your knuckles. And I think it was then that I realized like what success could feel like. And that was a huge shaping point for my confidence that has stuck with me forever. It's if I can get to that feeling of success, that's what I'm aiming for, that achievement feeling.
So yeah, it's always interesting to understand because those small lessons and influences, they're actually probably driving you now, and certainly formed you. And we see a lot of martial artists that we speak to that have done martial arts from an early age. It's those key moments. So another key moment, I don't know whether you can describe for us your first competition.
My first competition. Oh, you're asking me to go so far back here.
It's not that far back, surely. You don't look that old.
My dad held competitions twice a year. So we were competing a lot, and we traveled and we did competitions. So I don't know if I can remember my very first. For us, because it was my family and this was our lifestyle, it wasn't a big deal. It was sort of like, this is what, people go on family vacation and the Murrays have, family tournaments. So this was like just part of our, youth. I don't remember it ever being like a significant memory that I would be able to share with you, other than I loved those days. They were full of seeing my dad in his element and sort of running it. I'm sure rubbed off on me. I'm sure that I gained a lot of my ability to lead and speak in front of people and command attention in the room from him, because he is very much the same way. And, even my mom, who was sort of the supporting role throughout his career, just the way she organized everything and had food for everybody and the ticket sales and all of that. So I think my memory of competition is more about my family's impact and how the martial arts impacted my family and our upbringing. I have two brothers. We're all black belts. My whole family has a black belt. And it was just it was really a lifestyle for us. It wasn't just a hobby or a practice. Mm-hmm. I was immersed, 100% as a child. I remember we ate Japanese food in our home like it was our tradition and our culture. We had rice cooking all the time, not to be stereotypical about Japanese culture, but we really adopted it, as our own. So I used to get made fun of as a child by kids at school. They used to call us wannabe Japanese, right. And my dad's name is Kim. So that didn't help anything. There's all kinds of like political incorrectness going on. And but no, I'm so, back then it didn't seem like anything to me. It just seemed normal. That's just how we were raised. But now I'm just so grateful. I'm so appreciative that was our normal, because of all the brilliant skills that I've gained from those experiences.
Like you say, as a kid, you don't realize it. You just don't appreciate what you're being taught at the time. I mean, I got my black belt when I was a bit older than Jackson. I was 15. A lot older, Gavin. You were 10 when you were 10, but both my kids do it. Both my children have got their black belts when they were 10. Jackson's got daughters. All of his daughters have got their black belts. So as a family, and we put on, like, we used to put, when they were little, we used to put on regular inter-club competitions between the two of us, and we used to get them on the mat, and they used to go out, they used to come into their own music, and and we got it all filmed, and they loved it, and I know that every little bit of those competitions is so character building. It doesn't necessarily, they don't realize it, do they? Absolutely. But at the time, they're getting out on the mat in front of hundreds of people, cheering their name and watching them. And I used to say to them, you know what? It takes a lot of guts, a lot of effort to do what you've done. They're like, yeah, whatever, Dad.
They don't recognize it's so normalized, right? Like,
And I think that's we see that in society. So many things aren't normalized now. So the discipline. Even just going for a job interview, those feelings of fear that I had on my first gradings or my first competitions, I learned to understand what they were, and the adrenaline starts spiking, the heart's beat. When you walk into a job interview, well, actually you feel that, so you can control it as you have done or learn to control it as you have done on the mat. So when you walk into the interview, your head's clear and you can think clearly, and it's just an everyday process that you go through. But unless you've experienced that and trained towards it, then, you know, you can be in all sorts of trouble, can't you? As you see, I'm sure you see people in your other roles that you do.
It's almost like training to make the uncomfortable comfortable.
Correct.
So, you know, and that's what we do as martial artists. We put ourselves in uncomfortable positions so that that becomes comfortable for us. And we're able to, not that bad things won't happen to us, but that we're armed to, or scary things or disappointing things, or, you know, those feelings are going to happen, but how do we deal with them? What do we do with them is what we are taught to focus on as martial artists, I think. So, I mean, it's resilience, right? It's grit. It's being able to, you know, deal with those.
You don't grow. You don't grow when you're in your comfort zone. The only time you grow as a person is when you step outside of that comfort zone in whatever it is you do, whether it's speaking or it's in
podcasting.
No, but we always tell this story. So, you know, when me and Jackson first sat down to do the podcast, it was like, should we do a podcast? We've both been doing martial arts for nearly 40 years. We've known each other since we were friends. We've got loads of stories. We know a lot of influential martial artists to get on for interview. And Jackson was like, well, Gav, shut up. Who the hell is going to want to listen to us doing that? And I said, well, I don't know, but let's just. And then when we started, we were, you know, it was real. I mean, I felt physically sick. I have to be honest. You know, it was just like, I can't, you know, and I was so critical of myself. And, you know, we used to stop and we used to edit it to the max. We used to go, right, no, cut that out. Or no, cut that out. Well, now, you know, look, I suppose
turn up 2 minutes before a podcast, flip on the screen, check the mic, and off we go.
Yeah.
It becomes the norm, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, before we jump on talking about your transition into the business world and everything and all the good things that's brought, what would you say within martial art, what was your biggest failure?
So I do remember I traveled to Japan for a competition. It was a world competition, and it was my first time going to Japan and competing at that level. I was 15, and I had gotten really sick. I'd gotten mono right before we left. So I was not in, I had trained all summer and then got mono. So I was in great shape, and then I was not in great shape. I was sick and I was weak, but
you're going to have to fill it. Mono, what's that?
Mononucleosis. It's like it's like a sickness that you get, and it happens a lot in teenagers. It's actually called the kissing disease because
no wonder Jackson never caught it then.
I didn't get it from a gentleman, Gavin.
I didn't get it from kissing, but it just basically, it's like a really bad flu. It knocks you out for weeks. And so, but mentally I was really excited. I had a lot of confidence, but in the States, I was pretty good. I usually did really well in tournaments and competitions. So I had this probably a little bit of an ego, if you will. And I went to the competition, and I remember fighting this probably about 4'9" woman from France. And she just destroyed me. I mean, it was not even a fair fight. She was just so much better than me. And she was so small. I went into it going, because I'm a kicker. I like to kick. And you typically won't get past my legs. If you can, then you'll win, but you have to get by them first. And I mean, she just destroyed me. And I was to the point where I was like, I'm going to quit. This is not for me. I'm no good. I really was able to see, okay, there's a much bigger world out there where I just don't, I can't fit in. And, you know, obviously with some time and some coaching from my dad and my family, I got back up. But what it taught me was, you know, you have two choices. You can allow that to happen again, right? And to get your butt kicked, or you can go home and you can train and you can get better and you can, you know, come back and learn from it. And that was a what I call like a sliding door moment for me in my life, where I've never felt like that. I grew up very privileged, and I grew up in a very loving home, and I was always told how good I was, and you know, the normal parenting, maybe not coddling, but encouraging home.
Mentoring, isn't it? It's parent mentoring.
Yeah. And I'd never gotten my butt kicked like that before. No one had ever, you know, clobbered me in the face a million times. So that was a good experience for me. It taught me, it woke me up. It really allowed me to say, okay, I am not the best at what I do, and I have a lot to learn. And I did. I hated to spar. So that was the other thing, is I really didn't like it. I much preferred kata or weapons. But I forced myself, and I got so good that I started beating the men. And, you know, I started going to competition and just doing so much better because of that particular moment. So that was probably my biggest failure. I also quit many times. So, it took a lot for me to want to be in the martial arts when I was younger, because it just wasn't an environment that I felt, I didn't feel necessarily like I was seen. It was, martial arts is just very military. So you conform.
Yes, yeah.
And if you have any kind of individuality, it's not something you showcase. You have to look like everybody else. And as an adolescent who's kind of trying to figure out who they are, that can be conflicting at times.
Yes.
That was probably your inner performer trying to get out.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So I need to be on the stage. I want to be on Broadway. Did you ever get on Broadway? So I'm jumping ahead a little bit now, aren't I?
That's okay.
But did you ever get on the stage at Broadway?
I never got on the stage of Broadway. No. I did perform, and I did get in some shows that paid the bills somewhat. So I consider that a success, mild success. Like anything, if you get to do what you love and get paid for it, you feel successful, right? It's like, if I can get a paycheck doing this, then it's okay. But I never really committed enough to be at that level, to be on Broadway. I mean, you've got to be 100% focused on that.
Sure. So going back to in your 20s, so obviously you was working alongside your father, presumably in his dojos, building his martial arts. Was your father a good businessman, or did you feel as though towards the latter stages, when you maybe left to move on, do you think you had got up to that level where maybe you were the better business person, maybe a younger mind looking at new ideas? And do you think you were sort of so the main driver in growing his schools before you left, would you say? Or
so my father is a great businessman. He's what he is really good at is numbers. He's great at finances. He's great at vision. He understands how to work hard and be disciplined as an entrepreneur. Yep. So he really has the skill sets that a lot of entrepreneurs don't. Where his, I think, maybe moments of opportunity or areas of opportunity lie were in people, managing people. He's very alpha and very controlling, and it was very difficult for him to allow other people to be good at their job because he wanted everything done his way. Sure. And as time went on, there was ideas that came to the table and things that I wanted to do different, and it was kind of a butting of heads. And like I said, I feel like I had much of a voice a lot of the time. I have an older brother who's super smart. He's a surgeon. He's a nose surgeon in Miami. Okay. And he helped my dad's business grow enormously. He's the business mind. So he's really the one that kind of came in and evolutionized everything and taught me a lot of what I know again. And I tried to continue his legacy when he left to go to medical school. Sure. But my brother was the golden child. He was really my dad, the apple of my dad's eye, so to speak. And it was very hard to be in his shadow. So even if I tried to sort of bring new ideas, or it was like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been doing this for 25 years. I know what I'm doing. And I didn't like feeling that way, whereas when I started working at I Love Kickboxing, I had the opposite experience. I had my boss who was like, wow, these are great ideas. Let's hear more. So, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be listened to. And I knew that I could, give more. But a lot of that too was just our own dynamic father-daughter.
So you left, I suppose, under your father's wing, went to New York, got involved in the I Love Kickboxing thing. And you said, so that grew into quite a big franchise then. So how did that, how was it when you started? And I suppose, what was it like by the time you left, I suppose?
So when I first started, it was super exciting. And I think we did so many things well. And I really think that it had so much potential to be really, really great. And it was for a little bit. It was sort of like, looking back, definitely a peak moment for me in my career. We were just on fire for maybe 4 or 5 years. We were growing super fast. People loved us. It was really riding a high. And I think our product was really great. Unfortunately, I think our CEO became distracted. I think that the money and the sort of the power got to him a bit. And I just didn't agree with the direction that he was going. And it was very difficult for me to continue working and speaking for and representing a company that I just didn't share the same values. So by the time I left, there was a big disconnect. I was very unhappy. I felt that a lot of what was promised or preached in the beginning didn't end up actually happening, or it started to fade away. And so, a lot of probably drama that we don't need to get into, but it was a very, I left very amicably. I left respectfully. I, again, personally also wanted something different for my life. But I think in general, there was a lot of promises made to investors that just maybe were overselling and promising something that couldn't be delivered. And there was a lot of factors to that. We never had an opportunity to catch up to our growth. So when we started, we're a team of 10, but then when we had 250 franchises open, another 600 to open, our team kept getting smaller. Sure. So it's like I felt very limited about how I could help, because I wasn't given the tools and resources to do what I needed to do. Okay. So just a combination of things, but no, I didn't. Towards the end, I knew it was time to go, and I was right, because a year or two later, the company pretty much failed.
Right, that's really interesting. So what would you say was their secret sauce? With all businesses, they've all got their secret sauce, haven't they? I'd be interested to know what it was for that business.
I think the secret sauce for us was relationships. We were, and that's my specialty is developing relationships with clients and training a team that can really connect to their client on a human level. It was a very specific audience that we were working with. We knew our demographic. That's also, I think, something that really helped us. Sure. We were working with women primarily between the ages of 21 and 55. And we knew that they were women who had trouble losing weight in the past, or who had intimidation about going to the gym, or had, not had success, or whatever it was. So it was a certain type of person. And we trained our teams to really work with these women in a way that was special from any other gym or fitness. And it wasn't about the workout. It was about the relationship that we created as their mentor and as their coach. So I think that's what set us apart. And other than that, I mean, it's a great workout. So that wasn't it, because there's a lot of great workouts, right? And the design, a lot of nicely designed gyms. So for me, the difference was the time that we took in our customer service and the relationships that we built to make people feel truly like home, and that these were a team of coaches that cared about them as people and not just as a number.
I mean, it must have been hard for you as I suppose, an employee in the business, given all your knowledge and all your experience and seeing the brand grow around you, but maybe not having that say in some things that maybe want to happen. Am I right?
Yeah. And that changed, in the beginning, I was given a lot of autonomy and I was given a lot of freedom, and I ran with it. I stepped up to the challenge, and that's where I thrive, is like, give me something and I'll make it better. But again, my CEO at the time, he was just really growing in a different direction. And personally, he had a lot of things going on in his life, and it was distracting him. And he was, more and more, he stepped away from the company and the business. And so he was absent more and more. And then that just created a lot of, disconnect within our teams, and funding started, getting cut, and budget cuts, and people were getting laid off, and it was all, but yet his bank account was growing, and he was buying fancy cars and a brand new house and going on vacations. And so there was, distrust as well among our teams. So I think, in general, there has to be unity in the vision. Everybody has to be on working towards the same goal. Yep, and as you grow, that intimacy, it starts to fade, because everybody's busier, everybody's servicing more clients. Your teams are, trying to keep up with the pace of everything that's happening. And you just don't have the same type of connection and bond anymore. So we all grew apart. We all had different things going on. And I think that was probably our downfall is we grew really, really quickly, and we just didn't keep our eye on the prize.
It's one of the well-documented challenges of growing an organization, isn't it? Being able to keep those teams focused on the vision, and continue with the yearly mission.
Exactly.
It becomes a different skill set to start in a business.
Exactly. Well, and you have to, as the CEO, especially of a company like that's doing extraordinary numbers, you have to stay present. You can't walk away.
No. Well, if you do, you have to have somebody in place that understands your vision.
Yeah, and that's very, very
It's very
difficult, right?
difficult. No, it's not something that
Very
you can. It
difficult.
takes years to transition a lot of these organizations over.
Exactly. And that we weren't ready for that. And also I feel like there was a lot of different, concepts that sort of got in the way of like focusing on this one. We had such a good thing going, but then there was like, oh, well, let's do this and let's do that and let's do that. So that was another really good lesson I learned was if you do something well, just stick to that. Focus on that.
Water your own garden.
Yeah.
Keep your own garden green. You're definitely right. And look how you can expand and increase it. Okay.
It's having a team around you, isn't it, to do those other things that you're not good at. I mean, we're all good at certain things, and trying to. I love sales, I love people, I love networking, but I hate spreadsheets, and I hate, I don't know, invoices and all those detailed things. I'm not a detailed person, so I need to make sure that certainly with me and Jackson, we've got a number of businesses that we're involved in. We always make sure that we've got skill sets across each quadrant, if you like, because you need the numbers person, you need the finance person, you need the attention to detail person, you need the manager, and you need the salespeople. And there's no one person that's good at all of those things. You've got to have that team in place.
It's key to understand where your weaknesses are, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you can understand and admit that,
yeah.
then that's the self-help, isn't it? Really understanding that and then bringing the right people in to supplement where you're not as strong.
Yeah, well, it's like the Avengers. They each have their own superpower. You bring them together and they make a great team. But everybody's got to have their own.
Okay, so you're obviously a bit of a superhero theme. Then you mentioned the Avengers.
Only because I have a 3-year-old boy.
What Avenger are you?
Oh God, I don't know. You have to ask my son. I'm really not. It's just that I have a 3-year-old boy who's like obsessed with superheroes. So that's the only reason why I know.
Captain America for me, Jackson.
Yeah. Okay.
Far from it, Mr. Cook. Far from it.
So you went to New York then. Obviously you started you wanted to go out and be on the stage and everything else. Then you packed your bags and you went to Costa Rica. So I suppose where you got to Costa Rica. What sort of happened from there then?
So in Costa Rica, I started my own coaching business. My husband and I were doing some consulting and coaching for a fitness business, mostly some martial arts schools. And we also did a lot of like tour school visits or tours where we would go and work with their teams on site. And we were living the dream for sure. We lived on the beach. We spent every night at sunset on the beach. And I ended up getting pregnant with our second child about a year after we moved there. And unfortunately, she passed away when she was 6 weeks old. So that was sort of the end of the Costa Rican dream for me. It was very difficult for me to stay there after that. I just, it happened right at the height of COVID. There were a lot of factors that played into an already tragic situation that just made me miss the States and my family. I needed to be near family to grieve and to heal, but also I realized that how good we have it here and how privileged I was to be able to pick up my life and move to a third world country for a bit. And even though it was beautiful and it's paradise, there's a lot about it people maybe don't realize is also very difficult and stressful and inconvenient. And so things here are just, you'd think the opposite, like, oh, it's such a simple lifestyle there. And it is, but it's actually much more simple for me now being back in the States upon reflection. So yeah, that was my 2020 was really, everybody was kind of obsessing about COVID and in the States, of course, the election. And so everybody else was sort of living this parallel universe because I was really deep into grief. And I spent 2020 really just trying to recover and heal and make sense of my life, which had been pretty much taken away from me in an instant. Everything, my daughter, my home, where I lived, I stopped working because I felt like as a coach, I'm just empty. I don't have any, and listening to someone else's problems in the midst of losing my child was just, I couldn't.
It puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? When you've got, I've certainly not been through what you've been through, but it must be tough when you've been through such a bad loss, and things like social media is so prevalent and Facebook, and then you might go on there to try and cheer you up, and you see somebody whinging about a tiny little thing, which is probably a big deal in their life, but to you, you're thinking,
almost irrelevant.
These people need to get a grip because it must be must be such a challenging time. I mean, what sort of kept you driven and motivated during that time?
Well, I got off of Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a big thing for me. Originally, I've been very public. I've always shared my life very publicly. I'd like to think that I'm an influencer online. So I do feel like sharing my grief was initially a way for me to heal. So I was very public about it initially, but then I did have those moments of like, I'm actually making it harder for myself by being online and by listening to people who perhaps don't understand what I'm going through and are meaning well, but saying things that are actually agitating me more or making it feel more painful. And also just to really connect with my son and to be in the moment. I knew that I needed to turn off social media and step away completely and be private about my life, which I hadn't done. And I haven't been private about my life since Facebook started.
Yeah.
So that was an important step for me, was to go inward and really reflect and be private for a change, and to really be present with my son was such great medicine for me, just to be able to hang out with him. My husband has been amazing. He kind of went back to work, found a job, and said, I'll take on, that, and you can stay at home and just be with our son. And that to me was such a gift and such a helpful, that's been like probably the biggest thing that's helped me truly. But everything that we just talked about, the upbringing that I had, all of the confidence that I gained, all of the resilience and the grit and the discipline and the just learning how to stand back up has certainly shaped how I'm able to deal with this now. It was the most, obviously it's the most painful thing you can ever possibly imagine.
Of course.
And I thought I was a very strong person before, but it knocked me out. It pretty much took me down, just like in Japan when I was 15, getting clobbered, same thing, only where I felt, like I couldn't recover. And I don't ever feel that way. I always have hope. I always have optimism. I'm always a positive person, but this really destroyed me for a bit. Time, of course, as you probably hear people say, time heals all wounds. It's not a wound that ever heals. It's something you learn how to live with. It's a hole in your heart that will be there forever. So I think sharing about Charlotte and sharing the story that my husband and I have gone through and how our marriage has survived it, and being able to talk about it, is how your brain processes trauma. It's how it organizes it biologically and just how it understands what happened. So sharing for me is therapeutic. Now,
did you get involved with groups that had been the couples that had been in similar situations and had similar experiences? Was that a method that you used?
I did try it. I didn't really, it's not something I stuck with. I did a couple of groups and a couple of meetings. Everything was being done online because of COVID. And for me, it just didn't feel helpful. It was a little bit difficult, I think, through that medium. I did speak to a counselor a few times, but my healing has been very personal. I'm a very introverted person anyways. I work through things very independently. That's my process. I don't tend to open. My husband has been amazing, and the person that I feel like has really been able to empathize the most, of course, because it's something he experienced as well. So we have a strong faith. We're not religious, but we do have a very strong spiritual practice. So that's also very helpful. We feel like Charlotte is still here and her spirit is still within us. And I feel as though the again, kind of a light bulb moment for me in my grief was, my daughter lives within me, and she needs to experience life with joy. And if I'm sad and I'm living my life in sadness, then that's what she's getting. That's what she's experiencing. And I owe it to her to experience as much joy and as much happiness and as much, as much abundance as this life can offer me, so that she can have that experience through me. Yeah. So that's sort of the thought that helps me to push through the pain and the suffering, and of course also just allowing myself to be sad sometimes. Her birthday is coming up and it's killing me. Her 1-year-old birthday is going to be in 6 weeks, and it crushes me to think about having it without her here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make it special, and be whatever it is that I'm feeling.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love that. I love that philosophy, though. I think that philosophy is great, you know. And one thing you just said then, which I suppose I want to touch on, is you talked about living in the moment, and I think it's so prevalent, especially at the moment. So many of us don't live in the moment, and I hold my hand up for being one of those. When the kids come in, Dad, can you help me with something? Yeah, in a minute, son. I'm too busy looking at some stupid post on Facebook for somebody I don't even know who it is.
Yeah.
You think, what are you wasting your time doing these things? And you tell yourself that, but then you do the same thing again the next day, and you keep telling yourself, and it's funny because I was up late overnight and Baywatch came on. Right? Baywatch, and it was the original Baywatch series. And I just remember watching it. I remember just thinking, I remember obviously being a teenage boy at home on a Saturday afternoon watching Baywatch, but obviously there's not a mobile phone in sight, is there?
No.
And you're just watching it thinking,
only in the vehicle. I think they've got one in the vehicle, haven't they?
But yeah, they are. But you're watching it thinking, those were the days when we were young. We used to live in the moment. There was no social media. That was just us enjoying it for what it was at that time. And I know I don't want to harp on too much about social media, but it can be. I think it's such a curse. I think I think for the youngsters, they're not living in the moment, are they? They're always living in a different reality, or a past, or I don't know. But certainly not how we did when we were youngsters.
Yeah, it's a struggle, I think, for all of us as parents to balance that time. I still struggle, even though I have, very clear perspective on what's important. But I struggle with being present and being in the moment with my son. I think it's just natural and human. We can't beat ourselves up too much, as long as we're aware and we're actively trying to instill the right toolkit for our children to use. I mean, it's not going anywhere. So, again, it's not something that we can just go back to 1982 and say, let's just forget our cell phones and our lap. That's never going to happen. So what we need to create is a toolkit, a healthy, responsible toolkit for our kids to use these things productively and positively. And we have to model that. So I don't think it's wrong or bad for us to be on our phone, but also encourage limits and times when it's not appropriate to be on your phone, and enforce those habits.
It's one of those challenges, isn't it? Because technology is moving so fast. The next technology, the next fad. So as soon as society adapts, or as an individual you adapt to a methodology to cope with the introduction of that technology, we're flipping on to the next one, and then the next one, and then so you don't really. It's an evolution rather than the ability to be able to adapt to it, isn't it? You've got to continually pivot to the next thing and pivot your life to incorporate and embrace these things.
Well, that's what I mean. You said it, embracing it, I think, is for me, the focus. I'm not going to sit around and complain about it, because that doesn't change the reality. Instead, I want my son to harness the power of what it can do. And I want to, if he can be look at people who have made amazing things come from technology. Eventually we won't be driving our own cars. They'll be driving for us. And that's going to save how many lives from automobile accidents.
Sure.
So there are positive things that can come from technology. And I want my children to be on that side of it. I don't want to shelter him from it or take it away from him. He needs to know how to use it, and he needs to know how to use it so that he can stay ahead of those cutting edge, evolutions, and so that he is a productive member of society, even if it does mean that he is technology focused, because that's the future. So I'm not going to shield him from it. I have sort of a different approach. People are very, I don't want my kid on his iPad and no screen time. And I feel like that's a bit of a misstep, just because at some point, it's kind of like saying, you can never drink alcohol, you can never smoke cigarette, and they're going to want to do it just because
when they get out, they'll overdose on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally agree. I mean, I made that mistake, and gosh, going back to the 19, probably 2000 almost, where we had some, I refused to text people. And my daughter's got their mobile phones, and I'd been away from texting for probably 2 or 3 years. And they eventually got their phones, and they started texting, and they could put a paragraph out with their thumbs in 30 seconds. And it took me about 10 minutes to write a sentence. So I always vowed from then I would always embrace technology, and then understand it, control it, and then use it as I wish.
Yeah.
So now, just talk us through your role and what you're doing now as we're, fingers crossed, coming out of lockdown.
So I'm working with skills, which I absolutely adore. I'm as a mom of a 3-year-old, I'm learning so much about the brain and the stages of development. And I'm actually a psychology major. So I have my degree in psychology. So it's all kind of coming back to me now and helping.
Can we possibly book you a couple of hours with Gavin? He's got some dark places in his mind. He needs sorted out. He really does.
Yeah, I need more than 2 hours.
We all do. But yeah, so I really respect what Melody has created. I think it even though it's like common sense, like, hey, how can we work with kids and then not understand how their brains work or not understand like their stage of development? That seems like common sense. It's never been a practice in our field. So I think that what she's doing is incredible, and I highly respect her, and of course Michael and John and Jennifer and all the team. And I really love the results, that skills is able to create. It's like we were talking about before. It's such a jumping off point for what's about to happen next in our world. Mm-hmm. This is what kids need. We are at like the perfect position to just explode. If you are armed with the knowledge of the brain and how to help mental health, how to help kids cope with everything that's happened this past year, you are like prime, necessity, essential.
We're on the starting blocks, aren't we? We are on the starting blocks of something that's going to change.
You are. And as soon as things lighten up and as soon as people are able to get out more, this is such an opportunity. So we said before, like the setback precedes the comeback. And I really fully believe that, especially with skills, especially with children, because I think martial arts is unique and it's awesome, but there needs to be more to it. What I took away from martial arts was not punching and kicking. It was the confidence that I gained, the respect for my authority, the discipline, the hard work, the grit, the resilience, all of those things. That's what we should be focusing on. And in order to do that in a healthy, effective way, you've got to understand children and how their brains work. So I'm consulting for that company as a staff and system specialist. So that's really my forte is how to recruit, how to hire, how to develop teams, and how to keep teams, how to make them happy. And I focus on relationships and how to build those relationships with your staff and your team, and how to have great communication, and systems and organization are all a factor in that. And I'm also doing, I'm going to be sharing my story even more, perhaps, I don't know, a podcast in the future, a book, something that honors my child and honors the short but very impactful life that she had here. Mm-hmm. I think in general, I don't really know 100% what's next for me. Okay. I'm just sort of peeking my head back out into the world, to be honest with you, and kind of like, okay, where are we now? What's going on now? And where am I now? And who am I now? And how has this changed me and what I want to do with my life? So yeah, I don't know.
Wait and see, I suppose, then, really?
Yeah, wait and see.
Watch this space.
Yeah, just I'm focusing on my continued path of healing and recovering, and being a mom. That's really my 100% true calling is being a mom.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
Which we ask all our guests. So when you get up in the morning now, and I know motivation changes depending on where you are in your life, but what motivates you today?
My son, yeah. Knowing the impact that I have on him in these, especially now, these really crucial years where his brain is changing.
Early development years.
Yeah. And also just hope. You have to have hope. That's all we can have, really, is that there's something else, there's something more, there's something maybe not better, but something deeper, something else. So yeah, hope.
Okay. Do you want to wrap up with the last one then, Gavin?
Okay, so Kelly, knowing what you know now and the journey you've been on, all the way through your martial arts career and your life all the way up to now, what advice would you give to a younger you?
Oh God. I would tell myself, if this is possible,
You never know. 10 years time, technology, we could go back.
Yeah, we could. We maybe go back and talk to ourselves. Like I'm a people pleaser. I was always very quick to please others and say yes so that other people would feel good or praise me or like me or feel good about my work. I would try my best to filter out everybody else's opinion and what everybody else thinks and have more reflection and awareness about what I think and how I feel. Because I think a lot of times growing up, I was conditioned, I was conditioned to think something or conditioned to feel a certain way based on what society thought or what other people thought or what was professional or polite or respectful. And I just wish that I had learned how to hear myself when I was younger. But of course, I wouldn't be where I am now if that were the case. So I've learned so much. And so I can't ever say that I have any regrets. But that's probably what I would tell myself.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Kelly, I'm really chuffed you came on today. Like I say, I've not met you in person. Hopefully next time we come over to America, which hopefully end of this year, middle of this year, once all the lockdown, we'll be coming over to St. Petersburg to obviously to get together with you and the skills team. But one thing, I've seen a lot of you on Facebook. I've watched a lot of your, I listened to lots of these skills executive meetings, and your enthusiasm and your energy and your passion, given all the stuff that you've been through. That's why I really wanted to get you on the show. Well, why we sort of reached out to you, because there's so many people going through tough times of the COVID. And I'm sure a lot of them have had, a lot of experiences that seem quite bad, but actually compared to what you've been through, is nowhere near it, and, I just want to, there is hope and there is energy, and you've got to live that life. You can't just always reflect on what's the bad things that have happened. You've got to keep driving forward, haven't you?
Absolutely. Well, and everybody has, different struggles and challenges and traumas, but hopefully what my story can allow you to reflect on is the things that are important to you and your family and your health and the love that you share. And at the end of the day, that's all there is. So everything else is figure outable.
Oh, I've read that.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. I had so
one last question.
I'd
like to know, what audio book are you listening to right at this moment?
That's a great question. I'm listening to a book called Permission to Feel, and I 100% recommend it. And it's a book about understanding emotions and leadership. And also the author is also a martial artist. So I thought that was very interesting.
Cool. We'll have to
I'll download that in minutes 5.
Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. It's really, really great.
Okay, cool. Kelly, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you very much.
Have a great week.
Yeah, and enjoy the rest of the inauguration.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to go jump right on that now.
You've already missed Trump's bit, so I watched that. I watched that with a tear in my eye this morning.
Yes, we all have. Thanks so much, you guys. Take care.
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of the Motivated Martial Artist podcast. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page and our Facebook group, the Motivated Martial Artist podcast.
And don't forget also the Motivated Martial Artist Instagram page.
So head along for some extra content, interviews and much more.
So until next week, it's bye from Jackson
and Gavin,
the Motivated Martial Artists.